Hey, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining me for our Wednesday weekly Bible study. Tonight, we're going to be looking at the book of Ruth. We had this in our reading this past week, and I want to take a few minutes and just look at the book of Ruth. And lots of great lessons here for us to learn about character and about supporting other people and about encouraging one another and about redemption. So I'm looking forward to spending a little bit of time in the book of Ruth with you tonight. We'll get there in just a couple of minutes. I want to start with just a couple of announcements. The first is I just want to encourage you, if at all possible, if you're available on Sunday morning at 11, I just want to encourage you to come out to the service on Sunday morning. We've been talking for the past few weeks about being a transformational church, and we've talked about different people in the church who have done transformational things or led transformational things. And so this week we want to talk about how those things can happen at Suburban. We want to talk about where we're going and how we're going to be a transformational church in our community, how God is going to use us as his instruments in the lives and of people around us, and how he's going to use us to work to change the culture here. So if you're at all available Sunday morning at 11, we would love to see you here for our worship service. If you can't, if you're not ready to go out yet, for whatever reason, or if you're out of town, I just want to encourage you to watch online. We will be live streaming on YouTube at 11 a.m. So you can watch it online while we're having the service. But if you can't do it then either, we'll have the video up on Facebook and YouTube. And I just want to encourage you to tune in to that at some point in the next, afterward, if you can't watch it live. It's really good to have the opportunity to talk about what we're going to be doing going forward, and I'm looking forward to spending that time with you on Sunday and talking about those things. So Sunday morning at 11, if you can make it there. Also wanted to encourage you to come out for our Tuesday evening prayer meetings, and I know we've talked about this a few times. Just to clarify, our Tuesday evening prayer meetings are online exclusively. They're on a platform called Zoom. It's a video teleconference platform. So basically, if you go to suburbanchristian.org and you click on the Pray Today link at the top in the menu, it's going to take you to a page. You scroll down to the bottom of that page, and there's a Zoom meeting link. If you click on that link, it should take you into the Zoom meeting, and you'll be able to join us Tuesdays at 6:30 to pray with us. If you don't have a video camera on your computer, or you're having trouble getting into the meeting in that way, there are other ways for you to get in. You can dial in, and we're just happy to have you with us and talking with us and praying with us. So if you can't join us online and you want to dial in, please let me know. I'll give you the dial-in instructions. I'll try to put those out as well, just so they're available to everybody. So just want to encourage you again to join us for that prayer meeting on Tuesday night. We met last night, and we prayed through several things that are going on. And we've made this transition. We've been praying. So united together in prayer is kind of the focus that we've had as the church in Acts chapter 4 was. And last week we prayed for God to move in mighty ways among us. And today we are changing our weekly prayer. So for the next week, we're going to be praying together every day that God would bring new families into Suburban. Families that need to know Jesus, families that know Jesus and are ready to serve. We just pray for God to bring families in. So just want to encourage you to be praying that this week, as that's united together in prayer for God to bring families in. And I can't wait to watch him work. Every week we go during a prayer meeting, we go through our list of prayer requests, and we see God has answered more and more and more of them. And so we just know that as we pray together, he's going to answer these prayers as well. So I just want to encourage you to come to the prayer meeting on Tuesday nights. And also, I want to encourage you to pray about two other things. And really, they're kind of related. I want you to be in prayer for our country and really our world, because it seems that what has happened is Satan has successfully divided people. He has successfully come up with a way for us to be hostile towards one another. And what has happened is, we've got these issues that come up, and people take one side or the other side, and no matter which side you're on, the other side is just wrong and terrible. And so there's this hostility between groups, and it's disheartening. It's hard to watch, and it's hard to watch as believers participate in it. When you see these shouting matches on social media and whatnot, it's hard to watch that. So I just want to pray. I want to ask you to pray for our country as we kind of try to overcome some of that hostility. And really the only answer for that hostility, the only way to bridge the gap between two groups of people who are so diametrically opposed is Jesus. Jesus is the only way to bridge that gap. And so we just want to pray that Jesus will be working in those relationships and those interactions, and that he can use us to work in those ways as well. And then particularly one of those areas is the coronavirus, COVID. And again, there seems to be this, wear your mask, I don't need to wear a mask, this group, and there's this butting of heads over this issue. And it's hard to watch. It's really hard to watch. And so again, I just, pray that Jesus would be the interjection point there, that he would be the one who intercedes, because he's the only one who can resolve those differences. He's the only one. We can't. It's obvious that we can't. We've been yelling at each other since this whole thing started, and we're not good. We're not getting anywhere. We've all dug in our heels, and we have our opinion, and everybody else is wrong. And so what we really need is for Jesus to be the one we focus on instead of our opinions and the opinions of others. So just pray that those things happen. Pray that God protects. We have several families who are close to the church who are impacted by the coronavirus. Just pray for their healing. Pray for protection from COVID, and really pray that God just eradicates it altogether, because he can, and he's the only one who can. So just be praying for those things. Tonight, I just want to ask God's blessing on our time together, and pray that he would bless our study of Ruth. So would you join me in prayer? Father, we love you, and we see turmoil all around us. And so we come to you asking for peace. We come to you asking for intervention. We want you to intercede between us, that you would eliminate the hostility that's around us, that you would overcome all that is causing this dissension. And so, Father, I just pray that you would do that. And tonight, Father, as we gather around your word to study the book of Ruth, I pray that you would speak to us through these 4 chapters, that you would speak to us through the lives of Naomi and Ruth and Boaz, and that we would see how you work, and that we could apply that to our lives. Father, I pray that you would just be with us. Open our hearts and minds to your word and to your will. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So the book of Ruth. Every time I read the book of Ruth, I think this is really kind of the story of Naomi. I know Ruth is the key figure in this book, but really this is the story of Naomi. It begins with Naomi and Naomi's life being emptied and her being down in the dumps, and it ends with Naomi being fulfilled and her life being full again. And so even though Ruth is the main character in this book, I feel like this is the story of Naomi. And so that's kind of the way I approach it. There's a lot of lessons in here to learn from Naomi and Ruth and Boaz, all three. But it's just like every time it just kind of hits me that this is Naomi's story. So let's just walk through where Naomi's at. Right, Naomi is an Israelite. She lives in Bethlehem with her husband Elimelech. And they have two sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and there's a famine in Bethlehem where they live. And so they decide to move to Moab. And that's, so they're leaving the promised land to go back over the Jordan and into Moab because they're afraid of the famine. So not what God would ask them to do, not his ordained decision. But they go to Moab, and then lo and behold, Elimelech dies. And so Naomi is left with her two sons, and they have now married two ladies named Orpah and Ruth. And so she's left with them, and everything's kind of okay. But her two sons married Moabite women, which also not in line with God's will, not what is in line with his law, which is what's in force at this time. And so things continue to kind of spiral downhill. Naomi's two sons die. And so now Naomi is left as a widow with two daughters-in-law who are widows, and none of them have children. So they are in the lowest class of people because they have no one to care for them. They have no way of earning their own living or support. They are stuck, and they've got nothing. Naomi's life is empty, and really so are Orpah and Ruth's. And so, Naomi decides, hey, I'm going to go back to my homeland. Elimelech has, some land, and I'm just going to go back there. And so she starts to head out, and she tells her daughters-in-law, hey, why don't you stay here and go back to your families because they can take care of you. And so one of them, Orpah, says, okay, I'll go. But she weeps as she leaves Naomi. So clearly there's a love relationship here between Naomi and her daughters-in-law. But Orpah sees what Naomi is trying to get her to do. She understands her care for her. And so she goes. But Ruth, Scripture says that Ruth clung to Naomi. She wouldn't leave. And Naomi tried to encourage her, Ruth, just go back with her. I've got nothing for you. Even if I get married again and have sons, you're going to be too old by the time they grow old enough to marry. I've got nothing for you. And so that's kind of the way this starts. She has nothing, and she basically she's asking to be alone because she can't care for people. She doesn't have the means to care for people. But Ruth's response is famous. And I mean, what we study, probably the most famous verse in the book of Ruth is her response to Naomi, where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. And that's really critical because what it shows is Ruth's love for Naomi, Ruth's commitment to Naomi, Ruth's loyalty to this woman, and to this family she's married into. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful to see that. And we use that verse quite a bit when we're talking about loyalty, when we're talking about, God, our relationship with other people, our relationship with God, wherever he leads us, we'll go. Wherever our loved ones go, we'll go. We use that quite a bit. But really, the thing that I think is most important in her response to Naomi isn't that part. That's important, but I don't think it's the most important. I think the most important comes later in that verse. So Ruth chapter 1, verse 16 is her response to Naomi after she said, no, go back to your family. Ruth says this, do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. But here's where it gets interesting. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. So Ruth is a Moabite. She has grown up in Moab. All she knows is Moabite gods. And she's surrounded by it. The entire country, the entire land, the entire nation, they worship Moabite gods. They don't worship the God of Israel. And so Ruth is not born into faith in God. She is a Moabite. But she says to Naomi, your people will be my people. I'm giving up being a Moabite, and I am joining the people of Israel. And I am giving up following Moabite gods, and I am following your God. And what that says to me, it says a lot about Ruth's character, that she loves Naomi, and she appreciates Naomi, and she wants to follow Naomi. But what it really says to me is a lot about Naomi's character. Because of all the calamity that's happened in Naomi's life, because of all the hurt and the anguish and the trauma that she's experienced, for Ruth to say, your God will be my God, tells me that Naomi has acted and lived in ways that are glorifying to God even in the worst of times. And Ruth wants to be a part of that. Naomi's witness is glorifying to God, even though her turmoil, her life is difficult. Naomi has glorified God with her life. Ruth has seen that and wants to follow. That is beautiful. And that is incredible to see. And it's important for us to see, right? We talk about being a good witness. It's easy to be a good witness when things are going well. What's our witness when things are going poorly? Are we glorifying God with how we react to bad situations in our life? Because Naomi does that, and Ruth is drawn to God because of it. The same thing can happen in our lives. If we say that we love God and we claim God as our God and Jesus as our Savior, and when trouble comes, if we resort to all of our old habits and we don't glorify God with our behavior, people will see that. Do you think they're going to follow God because of that? Probably not. But if even in the midst of turmoil we glorify God, even if in the midst of turmoil we continue to live a life that is obedient to Him, and we continue to shout His praises in the midst of the storm, people see, and they're drawn not to us, they're drawn to God. They're drawn to Jesus because clearly He's different. Naomi demonstrates that for us right here, and Ruth follows. And that is beautiful. And that's the first big lesson of the book of Ruth, is that if we live a life that glorifies God, people will see and follow. Not us, but God. So Naomi gives in, and they go back to Bethlehem, and Ruth comes along, and they get back to Bethlehem, and they don't have any way of supporting themselves. They've got nothing, but they're just two childless widows with nothing. So Ruth goes out in the field to glean. Now, chapter 2 starts with our introduction to Boaz. And it's interesting here that Boaz is introduced at the beginning of chapter 2. Verse 1 says, "Now Naomi had a kinsman of her husband, a man of great wealth of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz." So we meet Boaz. Boaz is related to Elimelech, so by marriage to Naomi, and he is a man of means, and he is her kinsman. And we're going to talk more about that in just a few minutes. But we meet Boaz that way, and then it goes on with the story about Ruth having to do what she can to support the family. So she goes out to glean in the fields. Now, gleaning is something that was set aside by God. It's ordained by God, something that God has set up to happen. And it starts in Leviticus chapter 19, verses 9 and 10. And this is what God says when he gives out this law. He says, "Now, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very corners of your field, neither shall you gather the gleanings of your harvest, nor shall you glean your vineyard, nor shall you gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the needy and the stranger. I am the Lord your God." God is saying, hey, I've provided all of it for you. Leave some of it for people who are in need. I'm providing for them too. And so God has ordained this practice of leaving whatever is dropped in the field, leaving some of the crop behind so that people who are in need and people who are sojourning through can come to the fields and be fed. So that's what's happening here. Ruth goes into the field to glean. And it says she just so happened to come to the field of Boaz. How circumstantial is that? What a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. You know that. I know that. God was working here. God is the one who was guiding. He's guiding Ruth to the right place at the right time to meet the right person. And so God is ordaining her steps, even as she's going to glean from the field. Like, she is in the worst possible position. She goes and she's gleaning from this field. And it just so happens to be the field of Naomi's kinsman. That is God working. That is God working and orchestrating these things to happen. There's no other explanation. So the next few verses in this chapter, 4 through 16, are about kind of the interaction between Boaz and Ruth. And I've heard different people kind of walk through this story and see different things in it. I've heard some people say that Boaz saw Ruth and he was attracted to her, like there was a physical attraction to her. I don't know whether or not there was a physical attraction, but what I do know is that Ruth wasn't going there looking to be physically attractive to Boaz. She was going to glean. So she's there, she's dirty, she's sweaty, her clothes are probably filthy. She probably does not look good in any way, shape, or form. She is working hard. She's tired. And so if, Boaz, what I read, when I read what Boaz, Boaz is like, hey, who's she? What I see is Boaz being attracted to her character. Like, man, that girl has been working her tail off. Who is that girl? Who is that girl? That's what I see. I don't see it as a physical attraction. There may have been, I don't know. That's just what I see. It's like her character screams out to Boaz. And Boaz is like, hey, who is she? And then he once he realizes who she is, he's like, I'm going to make sure that she's taken care of. And so, Ruth works, Boaz notices. Ruth, and again, gleaning is like by right. That's something that she has the right to do, and she very well could go to Boaz and say, I'm going to glean your field, buddy. And that's the way it's going to be. But she doesn't do that. She comes to him and she asks about gleaning the field, and Boaz approves. So there's this interaction between the two that's positive, and that is good, and it is peaceful, and it's just good. And Boaz responds to seeing Ruth, and he talks to her, and he says this is good. Verses 8 and 9, chapter 2. Boaz said to Ruth, listen carefully, my daughter. Do not go glean in another field. Furthermore, do not go on from this one, but stay here with my maids. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Indeed, I have commanded the servants not to touch you. When you're thirsty, go to the water jars and drink from what the servants draw. So Boaz offers something to Ruth. He says to Ruth, look, I know that you've been working hard, and I know your circumstance, and I want to offer you something. I want to offer you companionship of the ladies in the field. Like, more often than not, when people were gleaning the fields, they didn't go and work with the workers in the field. They followed after at a distance. Boaz says, be with my maids, be with the ladies who are working in the field. He offers her companionship. He offers her protection. He says, and gleaning is dangerous. They're going into a field this Ruth is going into a field by herself, and guys could attack her, take advantage of her, whatever. But Boaz says, I offer you my protection. I've told my servants not to lay a hand on you. And then he says, I'm offering you refreshment. I'm offering you sustenance. He says, when you're thirsty, go get water. Which is, again, not necessarily a practice that normally happened. So Boaz offers these things to her. He shows kindness to her, and Ruth is thankful. And there's something about Ruth's response to him in verse 10 that is really interesting. It's weighing on Ruth who she is. She is a Moabite. She is not a person of Israel. So she feels like an outsider, and that clearly is weighing on her. And listen to what she says to Boaz in verse 10. It says, then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner? She's like, I don't understand, your kindness. Thank you for your kindness. I really appreciate your kindness, but I mean, what have I done to deserve this? And the answer really is, Boaz is a kind man, but he's also her kinsman redeemer. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But what's beautiful about Boaz's response, right? Ruth is new to following the God of Israel. She is new to this faith. And Boaz knows it. Boaz knows her story. He knows that she has followed Naomi. He knows that she has chosen to follow the God of Israel. And so what Boaz says to her in verse 12 is beautiful. He says, may the Lord reward your work, and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. Boaz sees what Ruth is doing. He sees her character. He sees who she is. He sees that she has devoted herself to the Lord of Israel, and he encourages her in what she's doing, but he encourages her faith in God. He encourages her. And how this is another good example for us that we can follow, right? How easy is it for somebody who's been a believer for a long time to see somebody who's a new believer who's struggling with something that we find easy or simple and be like, oh, I can't believe that that's an issue for them. Like we lose track of the fact that they're young believers, that they're still in the process of learning to obey all I have commanded. And so we look down on these people instead of encouraging them and building them up. Boaz shows us that we can encourage faith and still proclaim who God is. We can encourage faith and still proclaim who God is. May the Lord reward your work, giving credit to the Lord. The one whose wings you take refuge in, telling her where her protection really comes from. It's not from him, it's from the Lord. And so he does things and he says things that encourage her faith in this God of Israel, who is new to her. And so this is a beautiful thing for us to study, to see this interaction happen. So Naomi goes into the field, she gleans, and she comes back to Naomi at the end of chapter 2 with this harvest, really. And she has the equivalent of 22 liters of barley. 22 liters from a day of gleaning. That's incredible. It's just incredible. And think about a 2-liter bottle of soda, pretty big, pretty good size. Now imagine 11 of those filled with barley. That's what she gathered. That's a lot of grain. That's a lot for a day. And so Naomi is just astounded. She's astounded that Ruth would come back with this much. And so she praises Ruth for what she does. She praises Ruth for her hard work. She praises Ruth for these things. But in verse 20, we actually see that she praises God for allowing these things to happen. May he be blessed of the Lord, who has not withdrawn his kindness to the living and the dead. Remember, Naomi has been emptied. She has nothing left. She is empty. And God has, she says here that God has not withdrawn his kindness even from her. And the way he's expressed that kindness to her, it is through Boaz. Boaz is an instrument of God. We are instruments of God. We can do these things for people as well, the same way that Boaz does. Encouraging their faith, being kind to people, helping people who are in need. This is all beautiful for us to see, and it's an incredible example of who God wants us to be. So Naomi realizes that Boaz, wait a minute, whose field were you in? She says to Ruth, oh, you're in Boaz's field. Well, guess what? Boaz is our kinsman. And under the law, the kinsman redeemer, God has set forth in where is it? Leviticus 25. Yeah, Leviticus 25, verses 5 through 10. God sets forth this kinsman redeemer. Basically, what it says is, if you have a brother, a kinsman, who dies and he's married, you are to take on his wife and his family. You're to buy back his land and continue the family line through his property and his wife. And God has set that out in law. So it's a responsibility of the kinsman redeemer to do these things. And so Naomi says, hey, Boaz is our kinsman. Verse 2 of chapter 3, this is, and now is not Boaz our kinsman with whose maids you were? Behold, he winnows barley at the threshing floor tonight. And so Naomi says, oh my gosh, this guy who's been so kind to you, he is our kinsman redeemer. God has put this whole plan in motion, Ruth. Now I want you to go, and I want you to dress nicely and put on perfume and go, and I want you to lay at his feet. Now, there's, again, we get these, people will suggest all kinds of things about Ruth going to lay at the feet of Boaz. But here's what really is going on here. There's a couple important pieces, right? One, the kinsman redeemer is law. So Naomi and Ruth could go directly to Boaz and say, hey, buddy, you're our kinsman redeemer. I want you to take Ruth as your wife, and I want you to support us because the law says you have to. They could have taken that approach with Boaz. But what Naomi tells Ruth to do is not that. She tells him to go and put herself in a place of submission to Boaz, in a place of, asking for his favor as opposed to demanding a right. So that's what she does. She goes and lays at his feet until he wakes up, and she asks him for him to do what the kinsman redeemer is supposed to do. The second important piece to this is that Boaz is a man of honor, right? Boaz makes this commitment to Ruth. He says, I will do this. I will be your kinsman redeemer, but there's a problem. See, it would be easy for Boaz just to say, yep, I'm in. I've taken notice of you, Ruth. I like your character. I like who you are. And I'm going to be your kinsman redeemer. He could have done that. But Boaz is a man of honor. And he says, wait, there's another kinsman who is a closer relative than I am. And by law, it is his responsibility to be your kinsman redeemer. And so he says to Ruth, God's going to work this out for you. And don't worry, because by tomorrow night, you're going to know whether he's going to be your kinsman redeemer or I'm going to be your kinsman redeemer. But he says, I'm going to go to him and I'm going to ask him what he wants to do. And if he's not willing, then I will. So Boaz is a man of honor. He wants to do this for Ruth and for Naomi, but he says, I'm going to follow the law. I'm going to do what's right here. And I'm going to give this opportunity to this other man. And so at the beginning of chapter 4, that's exactly what Boaz does. He goes to this other man. He says, hey, just want you to know, Elimelech's wife is here. She's got this land, and you're the kinsman redeemer. Do you want this land? And he says, yeah, sure, I'll take the land. And then Boaz says, wait, just a minute. Not only do you get the land, but you get Ruth as your wife. And then he's like, oh, I'm already married. I'm already married. I don't know if I really want to take all that on. And so he's, it's going to affect his life in ways that are pretty significant. And he's a little questioning. So he says, you know what? I don't want to be her kinsman redeemer. And so there's this passing of the sandals, the kinsman redeemer requirements that come out of Leviticus 25. There's this, if you decide not to be the kinsman redeemer, then you exchange sandals with the one who is going to be the kinsman redeemer. But what's interesting is, in the law, what it says is that the kinsman redeemer, the one who refuses to take on the wife of his family member, the wife is supposed to spit in his face. Notice that doesn't happen here in chapter 4 of Ruth, because Boaz has already agreed to be her kinsman redeemer. Because Ruth has a kinsman redeemer. She doesn't have to spit in this man's face because Boaz has agreed to do it. And so this again, it's there doesn't have to be this hatred and animosity because God has provided a kinsman redeemer for Ruth and for Naomi in the form of Boaz. And then this is, I love the end of the book of Ruth. There's so much here in these last, 10 verses. In verses 9 and 10, Boaz makes this proclamation to all the people. And he says, hey, I am going to be her kinsman redeemer. I am going to take Ruth as my wife, and I am going to fulfill the requirement of the law, and I'm going to take care of the family of my family. And he makes this proclamation before all these people. And so it's beautiful that he says, I am going to do these things. He makes that public, that proclamation public. And then the response is great. It's awesome. Listen to what the people say after Boaz makes this announcement. It says, and all the people who were in the court and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel, and may you achieve wealth in Ephrathah and become famous in Bethlehem. The people see Boaz making this commitment, and they unite together and they pray a blessing over Boaz and his new family. It is so beautiful to see how the people come together. They unite together in prayer and they pray a blessing over this family. And I think we've seen this in the New Testament in Acts chapter 4 when the people unite together in prayer and God hears and God moves. Because what happens next? They pray for a blessing over Boaz and Ruth and Naomi, this family. And what happens next is Ruth has a son with Boaz named Obed. And Obed has a son named Jesse, and Jesse has a son named David. Not only does God bless Boaz and Ruth, God puts them in the line of David, in the line of Jesus. God puts them directly in that line. He blesses them beyond belief. Incredible how, again, this is just another example of God's people uniting together in prayer, asking for something specific, and God answering with just that. And answering in greater ways than they would have expected. I don't think any of them said, hey, we want you, God, could you bless them with being in the line of the Messiah? That's not what they asked. They just asked for him to be blessed. And that's it's just incredible what happens here when they unite together and pray. And that happens with us. Again, all these lessons that come out of this book are lessons that apply directly to who we are. But remember I said at the beginning that this is Naomi's story, that Naomi was emptied at the beginning. Husband dies, son dies, have nothing to support themselves, and come back to Bethlehem, and then this happens. And at the end of the book of Ruth, what we see is Naomi fulfilled. Naomi is fulfilled. Listen to what it says, verse 14 and on. The women said to Naomi, blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap and became his nurse. And the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi, so they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Naomi goes from having nothing, from having all taken away, from having all lost, to having this blessing. This kinsman redeemer comes into her life, and everything is restored, and she is fulfilled again. What a beautiful, beautiful story. I read this story, and I say that it's Naomi's story from being empty to being fulfilled, and I really, this is a story of hope. It's a story of hope, and this is what happens in our lives, right? We've all had moments in our lives that are kind of like Naomi's, where we've lost someone, where we've been hurt, where we've made a bad decision. And it's easy in those times to be like, why, God, is this happening to me? It's easy for us in those times to be like, oh, I think that I'm being abandoned by God. He's treating me bitterly, just like Naomi says. Call me Mara, she says, because God has dealt with me very bitterly. But if you look at this story, what you see is God weaving together all the events of Naomi's life perfectly so that she can be fulfilled. What a beautiful story. And I mean, think about this. Naomi marries Elimelech. They're people of Israel. They live in Bethlehem. There's a famine in Bethlehem. If there's no famine in Bethlehem, they never move to Moab. This story never happens. Her sons never meet Ruth and Orpah. Naomi never meets Ruth. So that story never happens. Her husband dies. Her sons die. And Ruth never gets to pledge her loyalty to Naomi upon her return to Bethlehem if this doesn't happen this way. And you know, they made a bad decision leaving the promised land and going back into Moab. But God worked through their decision and brought them to a point where good things happen. Naomi meets Ruth because of this bad decision. And then, you know, Ruth and Naomi form this bond, and Naomi comes to know God because of that bond that forms. They face this difficult journey home. They get back to Bethlehem and they have nothing. They have no way to support themselves. If they come back to a fortune, if they come back to wealth, then they don't need Boaz. They don't need a kinsman redeemer. They come back and they live happily ever after on their own. But they don't. They come back to being destitute. And so they need someone to help them. And so Ruth goes out into the field to glean, and she could go into any field, but God leads her to Boaz's field. You see how all these events work together. And even the kinsman redeemer who rejects Elimelech's family, that rejects Naomi and Ruth, even having a kinsman redeemer that rejects them, God uses to allow Boaz to be the kinsman redeemer, to allow this relationship to flourish, to allow these things to come to. And if you, at any one point in Naomi's life, at any one point in Ruth's life, when things are hard, when things are difficult, when things have gone terribly wrong and you've lost everything, at any point in time, they could say,